One of my goals for 2024 was to give you a little more insight on the projects that I've worked on in the past and do more breakdowns from the lighting perspective of some of these projects. And today we're going to do just that. I worked on a project back in November, I believe, with my friend Justice Stewart, who is an incredible director. You should go check his channel out. I'll link it somewhere here in the video. For our buddy Manny Torres, who is a recording artist in Chicago. The assignment Justice gave me was to light a sit-down interview with Manny that would then be used for a larger project that Justice and Manny had been working on. Now, before we hop into the doodle pad, there were two things that made this interview, I believe, 90% better than what it would have been had these things not been present. The first thing was location. Location is so important for anything that you're shooting, and a bad location can really put a damper on things, but a good location, such as the library that Justice found through PeerSpace, was perfect for this project.
The video's great, the music's great. I think we're gonna come out with some dope shit, dude. It's gonna be nice.
Second thing that made this interview situation 90% better was Manny, the talent. He's a good-looking dude, talented on the guitar, got some pipes, and he's great on camera. So,
yeah, I feel like there's a lot there for sure. It's just gonna be pieced together.
Those things coupled with the lighting, which really turned out being very simple, I believe turned this into a really good interview and hopefully something that Justice and Manny can be proud of for years to come. With those things in mind, let's hop into the doodle pad here and I'm going to break down the lighting for this interview. We are in the doodle pad and right now you are looking at the wide, and this is very wide. This is backed out just so we can look at the setup here, and then here in a second we will punch into our tight compositions. But the first thing that we wanted to do with the library, and if you're looking at this, tell me that's not an incredible looking set, and it was simple and easy to light, but we wanted to motivate really from these top lights up here as our practical lights. We placed our key up overhead of Manny, and that was our key light, again motivated by these hanging practicals. I think these practicals were a little warmer, so we ended up balancing, I think, to around 3200 Kelvin for, ooh, that's a bad 3. We ended up balancing to around 3200 Kelvin, maybe, for the key lights and for the practical lights there on Manny. Again, we wanted to go with a little more warmer feel. So that's our key light. The hair light that we used up here was Justice's aperture tube. Again, motivated by those hanging practicals. If you look over here on the far left of frame, we also have a small aperture MC, and all this is doing is just giving us some luminance on these books here. We found out that in the frame of the wide and on the B shot, they were a little bit dark, and it was causing our B angle to be a little less interesting than it could be, but the MC just gave us enough luminance on those books to really make a little color pop in the back of the frame for the B shot. That is literally the lighting setup. I know this is probably a downer for a lot of people, but for me it's actually pretty encouraging to know that a lighting setup can be so simple yet so effective. One thing to mention again with the location, if we look at composition here, one thing that I love about the library is that bookshelf creates frames everywhere and just make things look really nice. The books are interesting. One thing that we probably could have done a little differently, at least on the wide, and we tried to pull the couch as far forward as much as we could, but we only had so much room. But I wish we would have gone even just a little bit further forward to try to create some separation, which some of that can be handled in the color grade too. You can always darken the background to make Manny pop a little bit more. Anyways, those are the things that we had in mind whenever we were lighting this scene. Again, a very simple lighting setup. We have a key light, which was my newer FS150B. We had a tube light to give him some separation from the background, and we had the aperture MC. Very, very simple. Very, very simple setup. All right, so let's go to these tights and look at what this setup was able to do on our tighter comp. So let's look at this composition right here. And again, this simple setup, I believe, was so powerful and so effective, especially considering we didn't have a lot of time. I think Justice had booked it for 2 hours. Anyways, with our motivated practicals there now, we were able to scoot our key light in on Manny just to try to soften it up a little bit. We didn't want to make it too soft because obviously our practicals are a hard light source. Probably could have exposed to them a little bit more. That one's looking a little bit hot now that I'm seeing it. Anyways, we slid this in to soften the light on Manny's key side. We shot from the shadow side, which is very common for a cinematic quote look. One thing that I love about this frame here is we have a nice little Rembrandt light over on Manny's shadow side, and that tube light, if you remember, that was over here is being motivated by this practical, and just filling in his shadow side ever so slightly so that we have a smoother roll off from our highlight to our shadow side. Again, very simple setup, but I believe very effective. And with the library, we just have leading lines everywhere from these bookshelves, which are just things that make compositions work even when the lighting setup is this simple. Let's go to another one. This was our B angle for Manny's interview. And if you remember me mentioning earlier this pile of books right here, these are what we illuminated with that little aperture MC back there. Without the aperture, these were falling fairly dark, so we wanted to light those up a little bit just to create some interest back here because this was all falling pretty darkly into shadows. So we fired the aperture MC up, lit these books up a little bit. We have a little bit of light up there on the top just to give us some interest. And this is a pretty tight composition anyways. Clearly we were shooting with the lens opened up a little bit. I would say actually opened up a lot because that background is obliterated, but this was something that just created another level of interest. Again, the position of the key, we have it up overhead, and I'm sorry this recording is getting a little bit gommed up with all these drawings. Now, key was up top overhead. We can see that it's got a little bit of Rembrandt going on here, and our tube light on the shadow side is just filling in that shadow so that we have a nice easy roll off. Okay, the last frame that we'll look at, again, we had the lighting set up exactly the same. We just moved the light closer to Manny, so we have this nice rim around his hands. We are still shooting on the shadow side. Here on his back side, we have that tube filling in the shadows. We probably could have powered it down just a smidge right here. It's looking a little bright, and we have that shadow there coming off of his ear. But we have Manny here on the shadow side, still a little bit of a Rembrandt coming through. He looked down a little further. He ended up looking back up, but either way, again, shooting from the shadow side. Key stayed in the same spot, still motivated from those lights that were up overhead. And this image just works right here. Again, we have him in a frame. We have some nice little speculars back there with the street lights that were outside of the studio. And this is just a beautiful B-roll shot, or a beautiful B comp that Justice was able to use for the main. Lincoln. The goal with this video is to show you that lighting setups do not have to be complicated. Again, we were able to light this with two lights, a tube light and my main key light, motivated by those hanging practicals. I want to thank Justice for inviting me out to this shoot and thank him for trusting me with the lighting setup.
So, we'll see you over there. You see
Influencer. Smack, you gotta smack it. If you liked this video and want to see more breakdowns from me in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. I would love to hear your thoughts on this breakdown in the comments below and your thoughts on the setup. Thank you for being a part of this channel. I love growing this community here on YouTube. Y'all have a good one, and we'll see you in the next.